Welcome to class. In our continued series of founding scholars in modern social linguistics, today we are going to talk about John.J.Grumperz, a renowned linguist, an anthropologist, an ethnographer, and a wonderful professional researcher and person. A, a long illustrious career and his major contributions and a series of collaborations with philosophers, linguists, psychologists, anthropologists uh, allowed him to produce so much voluminous work and a wide range of his personal experiences with different cultures. His travel to India, Norway, various parts of United States, England, allowed him to collect a lot of ethnographic data and interactional data and communication data and enriched his experiences and knowledge, and what we see that culminated into series of impactful and influential publications. John.J.Grumperz is one of the founding pillars of social linguistics, and his major contributions force us and inspires us to include him in the galaxy of scholars who shaped the discipline. So today we are going to talk about John.J.Grumperz. John.J.Grumperz, John Joseph Gumperz, or Joseph Gumperz, a German name, uh, was born on 9th January 1922 and passed away on 29th March 2013. He was an American linguist, and for most of his career he worked at University of California at Berkeley. He is known for his research on languages of India, code switching in Norway, and on conversational interaction, discourse analysis, linguistic anthropology, and urban anthropology, uh, to name a few areas. If we look at his journey as a researcher, as a sociolinguist, as an anthropologist, as an interactionist, it is full of milestones. Hans Joseph Gumperz was born on January 9, 1922 in Hattingen, Germany. And the first word Hans was a German name, which he Americanized later on as John. As a Jewish youth, he was, barred by Nazi racial laws from attending high school, and his parents sent him to Italy for studies. Later, he was, at a Dutch refugee camp before moving to United States with his families in 1939. He changed his name as John Joseph Gumperz, and he went to serve in the United States Army for a very short period of time. Gumperz earned a bachelor degree in chemistry, and he started working in the similar area at University of Michigan before he realized that language can also be a theme, a subject of scientific investigation. He was so fascinated with this idea that he switched over to graduate studies in linguistics. Through in-depth fieldwork in Norway, northern and central India, Austria, Slovenia, the United States, and a large part of England, he collected ethnographic data that further enriched his understanding of communication in context, of social boundaries and socio-linguistic structures. Uh, Among his most intensive collaborations was his work with a very renowned social linguist, Delhams, about whom we have already talked. Uh, in founding the ethnography of his speaking and publishing the classic work Directions in Social Linguistics in 1972, and a decade later, Gumperz published two more foundational works that defined the field known as interactional sociolinguistics, discourse strategies, and language and social identity. For the next 30 years, Gumperz would combine teaching at Berkeley with numerous research projects in the United States and abroad. Exemplary of this is his volume of essays entitled Rethinking Linguistic Relativity 1991, co-edited with his former student Stephen C. Levinson. After returning from India, uh, Gumperz was invited to establish a Hindi Urdu program at the University of California, Berkeley. And he worked intensively to research and promote Hindi and Urdu at Berkeley. In 1964, he became a member of Berkeley's Department of Anthropology and a leader in the university's new Language Behavior Research Laboratory. In the mid 60s and 70s, Gumperz worked with a galaxy of scholars and researchers who shared his interest in the relationship between linguistic meaning and the inferential process of communication. And to just name a few collaborators with whom Gumperz worked, people in philosophy like H.P. Grice and John Searle. They are pioneer in philosophical research. Linguists like Charles Fillmore, Robin Lakoff and George Lakoff. Anthropologists like Brent Berlin, Dullhams and Paul Kay. And psychologists like Suzanne Irwin Tripp and Dan Slobian. So, if you look at a wide range of disciplines he worked in and a huge galaxy of scholars he collaborated with, we can imagine and understand the quality of research work he produced and the immense impact he rendered to the discipline. Gumperz collaborated with all these scholars and others in cross-disciplinary research and teaching that helped shape a generation of students and a new paradigm in interactional sociolinguistics for integrating social science bearing on speech practices. So, he studied language in reaction, language in real socio-cultural context. He developed a new way of looking at social linguistics with Dullhams, and their contribution was a new method called ethnography of communication, which Dullhams developed as a speaking model that we have already talked about, and you can see the details of details in the video that we did on speaking model by Dullhams and communicative competence, of course. But Gumperz's own approach in dealing with language in socio-cultural space and the actual interaction taking place among members is known as interactional sociolinguistics. So, Dullham's approach was known as ethnography of communication, where Gumperz also contributed a lot, collaborated with Dullhams. But Gumperz's own unique work and intervention is known as interactional sociolinguistics. Gumperz built on Heim's work by looking at different power between speech communities. In particular, uh, Gumperz noted that the standard form of any given language, the form that is expected in formal situation such as on the news and media and administration, is a dialect of those who are already in power. So, the stratification of society reflects upon the stratification of organization of dialectal variations in the society. So, the people, so the formal speech that you call is the dialect of the powerful people, and that's what this is how he connected language and its use with power structure in the society. He called that prestige dialect and a kind of diglossic situation. He noted that those who did not speak that dialect natively but instead a stigmatized or less powerful native dialect were diglossic because they were fluent in their native dialect and also able to use the prestige dialect. So, diglossic situation created out of social power network. This is what he pointed out. However, those native dialect was the prestige dialect were rarely able to use other codes. So, a diglossic situation where the prestige dialect speakers could not use the low prestige dialect, but these people were diglossic, bilingual and diglossic in the sense that they used the prestige variety in order to be included in the social power structure. Gumperz was interested in how the old order of situation and the culture of the interlocutor both affect how interlocutor makes conversational inferences and interpret verbal and non-verbal signs. He called it uh, contextualization cues, what we know in in other disciplines, communication research, overlapping terms like paralanguage and kinesics. Gumperz development of the anthropology, Gumperz development of ethnography of communication evolved through his studies of the way language is used by people in different social networks and the way these networks are produced and reproduced in communication. So, the pattern of interaction is deeply rooted in the pattern of the network of society, power network of the society, hierarchical network of the society. He was among the first scholars to note that linguistic diversity correlates with social stratification, so that highly stratified systems such as the caste system in India develop highly diversified communicative styles to mark the social identity of group members as well as the exclusion of non-members. So, one of the few scholars who correlated social structure with linguistic structure and patterns of use. Gumperz was one of them. If we look at the major work, and as I mentioned, it is very difficult to make the complete list of his contributions to the field, but there are certain major works which require a mention here. I will quickly go through the select works of John Gumperz year wise and the years which are not mentioned here in the list, years which are missing in the list, doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that there was no work produced. But what I have tried to selectively count those works which represent his contribution towards development of the field. In 1955, the phonology of North Indian village dialect, major work, was published in Indian Linguistics, volume 16. In 1957, some remarks on regional and social language differences in India. That was the time he was in India and he worked on Indian languages. Then in 1958, he published Dialect Differences and Social Stratification in North Indian Village. It was published in American Anthropologist. In 1960, Linguistic Diversity in South Asia, Introduction with Charles Ferguson, and it was published in International Journal of American Linguistics. In 1961, a major publication came out, Speech Variation and the Study of Indian Civilization. It was published by American Anthropologist, reprinted in Durkheim's edited volume called Language in Culture and Society. Another major publication in the same year came as Naming Practices in the Hindi speaking area, Working Papers, right. It was published by Center for Applied Linguistics, Washington DC. Conversational Hindi Urdu with June Rumi, and another work, Conversational Hindi Urdu Volume 2. Right. In 1964, the Ethnography of Communication with Durkheim's, it was published again by American Anthropologist. Another major work that appeared in the same year was Hindi-Punjabi Code Switching in Delhi. That was the year when he was invited by the university to establish a Hindi-Urdu center for learning. Another major publication in 1964 came as Linguistic and Social Interaction in Two Communities, Religion and Social Communication in Village of North India, and last but not the least, a brief Hindi reference grammar, right, with a renowned Hindi scholar Vidya Niwas Mishra was published in 1964. So, a lot of early publications are from his Indian experiences and Indian field work. In 1967, the relation of linguistics to social categories. In 1968, the publication Language in Social Interaction, Proceedings of 8th International Congress of Anthropological and Ethnological Sciences, held in Tokyo, Japan. In the same year, some Desideratta in South Asian Area Linguistics. In 1972, Directions in Social Linguistics for Durkheim's edited was published by Reinhardt and Winston, New York. The Communicative Competence of Bilinguals, it was published in Language in Society. In 1975, yet another publication titled Conversational Analysis of Social Meaning. In 1979, Developing Skills for Inter-Ethnic Communication. In 1980, The Sociolinguistic Basis of Speech Act Theory. In 1981, Ethnic Differences in Communicative Style. In 1982, Discourse Strategies, published by Cambridge University Press. In 1983, Inter-Ethnic Discourse, published by Society. In 1984, Ethnography in Urban Communication. A major publication came in 1991, where it talks about rethinking linguistic relativity with his student Stephen C. Levinson, and he revised and created a fresh debate by publication of this work in age-old Sapir-Whorf hypothesis and controversy related with it. In 1996, Treacherous Words, Gender and Power in Academic Assessment, a major work in Language and Gender was published. If you look at these publications, and again I repeat, these publications are very selected publications, but he has prolifically published his experience with a huge galaxy of scholars, of philosophers, of linguists, of sociologists, of anthropologists, you know, allowed him to elaborate and make a very consolidated impact on the shape of this discipline, where he combined anthropology, sociology, psychology, and linguistics together. Uh, John Gumperz, extended field works helped him understand language in real action. Fieldworks in Norway, where it worked on code switching, intensive fieldwork in India, and I am one of the fortunate persons who in person spent time with Gumperz when he was uh, visiting University of Delhi, and I spent 14 days with him, learning a lot from our discussions and associations. And he was a very incredible scholar, and with a very rich experience of the field. He was a real field worker who worked in the field with the real speakers in the real situation, in the real community. So he was a scholar who worked with people at the grassroots level, and he could monitor, he could observe language in action in the real socio-cultural space. His extended field work allowed him to uh, develop his understanding, a very keen observation, and very deep understanding of language, interactions, and communication patterns of communities. Language and gender, language and power, interpretations, you know, how power is encoded in language, uh, in terms of power, the diagnostic situations. He worked in code switching in Norway fieldwork, his fieldwork in England, his fieldwork in United States, his intensive fieldwork and multiple visits to India enriched his experience. And if you can see the list of publications that he came out with, he is known for his publications on Indian languages, Punjabi, Hindi, Urdu, and then the attempt to correlate linguistic structures and patterns of use with that of the social structure and cultural norms is immensely important and has a very deep impact on understanding language in action. His own method is known as interactional sociolinguistics, and he worked on the interface of anthropology and linguistics. He graduated in linguistics after his early degree in chemistry. So, a wonderful person, a great scholar, a, a, an influencer, and one of the vital pillars of the discipline. Gumperz has survived with a huge trajectory of work in social linguistics, anthropology, and on the interface of anthropology and linguistics. We will continue our discussion about such stalwarts and pillars of the discipline in our coming videos, like Joshua Fishman, like Charles Ferguson, like Alan Grimshaw, like Uriel Wenrich, and others. So stay tuned in and see you in next class. This is it for now. Thank you very much.